The night after the painting came to life, Cale could not sleep. The image of Queen Alara's painted eyes stayed in his mind. They were not still like any painting should be. They moved, gentle but aware, as if they were truly watching him. He sat near the window of his chamber, staring at the moonlight that filtered through the curtains. The air was quiet, too quiet, as though the palace itself was holding its breath. Somewhere far down the hall he thought he heard footsteps, soft, slow, and unsteady. When Cale opened his door, no one was there, but a faint sound brushed his ear, a whisper, familiar and low. "Cale." He froze. The voice was not a dream. It was the same tone the painted Alara had used the night before. He followed the sound to the queen's chamber, though every step felt heavier than the last. The door stood slightly open. Inside, candlelight flickered weakly. The portrait still hung on the wall, glowing faintly like it held a secret flame within. Queen Alara sat before it, her hands folded in her lap. She did not move as Cale entered. "You should not be here at this hour," she said softly without turning. "I heard someone calling my name," Cale said carefully. "It sounded like you." Her shoulders tensed. "Then you must learn not to listen." He stepped closer. "Your Majesty, something is happening with the painting. It feels alive." She turned slowly toward him. Even behind her veil, he could feel the weight of her eyes. "That is because it is," she whispered. "Every reflection holds a fragment of the soul that created it. And every curse seeks a way back to life." Cale frowned. "Then what did I awaken?" The queen looked back at the portrait. "Not a ghost? Not yet. Something between memory and truth. The reflection of who I was before the curse." Her voice trembled slightly. "She remembers what I forgot." For a moment, the only sound was the quiet hiss of the candles. Then Cale asked gently, "Does it hurt you?" She shook her head. "No, but it tempts me." "Tempts you?" "Yes. To look, to see myself again. To remember the woman I once was." Cale looked at her with quiet sympathy. "Maybe remembering is not a sin." "Not a sin," she murmured, "but a danger. There is a reason mirrors were banished from this palace. Every image desires to become real." The next day, whispers spread through the castle. Servants claimed they had heard soft singing in the queen's chambers at night, a voice too young, too alive to belong to her. Some said they saw a shadow moving on the walls even when no one stood there. Prince Rowan confronted Cale in the study. His expression was sharp, his patience thin. "My mother seems different since you came," he said. "You were always curious, Cale. But curiosity is not harmless here." Cale tried to stay calm. "I have done nothing to harm her, Rowan. She asked me to paint her. I only obeyed." Rowan's jaw tightened. "You painted her? Do you realize what you've done? Every image of her was destroyed after the curse began. You've awakened something that should have stayed buried." Cale's heart ached. "You speak as if she is already dead. She's still your mother, Rowan." "She is a queen before she is my mother," Rowan said coldly. "And she is cursed. Don't confuse pity with loyalty." The words struck Cale deeply. For the first time, there was distance between them, the distance between a crown and a commoner. That night, Cale returned to his room, but the silence pressed against him again. He could not rest. Something in his chest felt drawn toward the queen's chamber, like a thread pulling him closer. When he entered quietly, he saw her standing before the portrait without her veil. The sight took his breath away. Her face was pale and luminous, her beauty fragile but still powerful. Yet her eyes, her silver eyes, were full of sadness, as if she carried centuries of grief. The painted version of her on the wall looked younger, brighter, almost alive. And then, before Cale's eyes, the lips on the portrait moved. "You shouldn't hide, Alara," the painted version whispered. "You were meant for light." The queen's hand trembled. "Silence," she breathed. "He sees you," the painted version said softly. "He sees what even you have forgotten." Cale could not move. He wanted to speak but could not find the words. The queen turned sharply toward him. "You should not have come. I had to," Cale said quietly. "I could feel something calling me." "Then you have already been touched by it," she said sadly. "The portrait knows your name now. That means the curse has noticed you." Cale's pulse quickened. "What does that mean?" "It means," she whispered, "your reflection is no longer safe." Days passed. Kyle tried to focus on his studies, but every mirror, every polished surface began to disturb him. Sometimes he thought he saw movement, his reflection turning its head after he had already moved away. The queen grew weaker each day. Her voice became softer, her hands colder. When Kyle asked if she was ill, she only said, "The painting draws from me. It feeds on what I once was." He begged her to let him destroy it. "No," she said firmly. "If it is destroyed, I will die with it. The curse tied my soul to the reflection. You cannot unmake what has already been bound." "Then what can I do?" Kyle asked helplessly. She looked at him for a long moment. "If you wish to save me," she whispered, "you must finish what you started. The painting is not complete. It seeks the truth, my truth. Until that truth is revealed, it will never rest." That evening, Cale returned to the chamber once more. The queen sat nearby, her veil restored. He took up his brush again. Every stroke felt heavier, as though each line carried more than paint, as though it carried her spirit itself. The portrait seemed to watch him, guiding his hand. Sometimes it whispered softly, showing him what to paint. The queen's younger reflection looked alive now, her eyes filled with light. "Why are you helping me?" Cale asked the voice quietly. "Because he still believes," the portrait whispered. "Because he loves what is dying." Cale froze, his heart trembling. "I do not—" But before he could finish, the queen spoke behind him, her tone tired but knowing. "Do not answer, Cale. Words can awaken more than feelings." He set down his brush and turned. "Your Majesty, I only wish to free you." Her veil shifted slightly as she sighed. "Freedom always comes with a price." That night, thunder rolled above the palace. A storm gathered over Varel, dark clouds swirling like restless spirits. Cale couldn't sleep again. He walked through the empty corridors until he reached the throne hall. To his shock, Prince Rowan stood there holding a torch. "Cale," he said coldly, "I warned you." Behind him, guards entered, their armor gleaming. "What are you doing?" Cale demanded. "I am ending this," Rowan said. "The painting is cursed. I will burn it, even if it means my mother's wrath." Cale's heart raced. "If you destroy it, you will destroy her." Rowan's eyes flashed. "She is already gone." Cale stepped in front of him. "You're wrong." Before Rowan could answer, a violent wind burst through the corridor. The torches flickered. A faint voice echoed from the queen's chamber, the voice of the painting. "You cannot stop what has begun." Rowan turned pale. "What was that?" Kyle didn't answer. Both of them ran toward the queen's chamber. When they arrived, the door slammed shut behind them. The portrait glowed brightly, light spilling from the cracks of the frame. Queen Alara stood before it, her hands raised, her veil lifted by invisible wind. Her painted reflection smiled darkly, a smile that did not belong to her. "Free at last," the voice whispered from the canvas. The queen gasped. "No, not yet." The portrait's eyes glowed brighter, and suddenly the canvas tore from top to bottom. A second figure stepped out. A woman identical to Alara but colder, her beauty sharp as glass. Rowan stumbled back. What? What is that? Alara whispered weakly. My reflection. My shadow. Kale felt the air crack with power as the two queens faced each other, one made of sorrow, the other of desire. The real Alara fell to her knees, her strength fading. Kale, she whispered, her voice trembling. Do not look at her eyes. The shadow smiled at him. You painted me, Kyle. You gave me life. Will you now take it away? Kyle felt his hands shake. He wanted to run, but something in her gaze held him still. Familiar, warm, and terrifying. The Shadow Queen lifted her hand and the air shimmered like glass. Your reflection belongs to me now. The room filled with light. Kyle closed his eyes against it, but he heard the Queen's voice, faint, desperate, calling his name one last time. When he opened his eyes, the chamber was empty. Only the torn canvas remained, fluttering in the cold wind. And from somewhere deep within the palace walls, a low, haunting whisper rose, half sorrow, half promise. It has begun. The kingdom of Varele was a land of silver rivers and endless night skies. Once it had been a place of music and laughter, but now a heavy silence rested over its marble halls. The people said that long ago a curse had fallen upon the royal family. No mirror was allowed in the palace, no painting of the queen could be made, and every window was covered with dark silk curtains. When Kale arrived at the castle gates, the air itself felt heavy, as if the stones remembered sorrow. He was a young scholar of 20 summers, quiet and thoughtful, with a mind that loved stories and secrets. He had come to Varel to study the ancient art of reflection magic, a forbidden craft said to reveal truth through images. Kyle's oldest friend, Prince Rowan, met him at the courtyard. Rowan smiled, his gold hair catching the dim light. You finally came, he said, pulling Kale into a brotherly hug. You'll find the palace colder than I remember, but your presence will warm it a little. Kale smiled. And your mother, the queen? How is she? Rowan's smile faded a little. She lives, he said simply, but she no longer shows her face to the court. The curse has never left her. The words hung between them like mist. Kale had heard the old stories, that Queen Alara had once been the most beautiful woman in the realm, wise and kind. But after the death of her husband, a dark spell had taken her reflection, binding her beauty to silence and sorrow. Any who saw her eyes for too long, it was said, would see the image of their own death. That night, Kale was given a chamber near the old library. He spent hours studying dusty scrolls about mirror enchantments and soul paintings. The more he read, the more he wondered about the queen. What curse could trap a woman between light and shadow? The next morning, a maid knocked softly at his door. The queen wishes to see you, she whispered, her eyes wide. Kale was led through winding corridors until they reached a large room draped in silver and black. At the far end sat Queen Alara, half hidden behind a veil of dark silk. Even in shadow, her presence filled the room like music half forgotten. You are Kyle, the scholar, she said, her voice calm and clear, like water flowing over stone. Rowan spoke of you often. Kyle bowed deeply. Your Majesty, it is an honor. You study reflection magic, she said softly. A dangerous art. Kale hesitated. Yes, my queen, I wish to understand how light can capture truth, but I have no wish to use it for harm. She was silent for a moment. Then she said, Once, I too loved such knowledge. But knowledge, when mixed with desire, can become a curse. He lifted his gaze, meeting her veiled form. Then you believe truth should remain hidden? Perhaps, she said. Or perhaps truth is too heavy for the heart to bear. She stood then, her movements graceful despite the layers of silk. I have called you here for a reason, she said. I want you to paint me. Kale froze. To paint you? Yes, she said, her tone both gentle and commanding. I wish to see myself once more, not through a mirror, but through another's eyes. He hesitated. But the law forbids it, Your Majesty. The curse— I know the law, she interrupted. And I know the curse. Still, I ask it of you. Her voice trembled slightly, though her words remained steady. If you refuse, I will not command it again. Kyle looked at her, feeling both fear and wonder. He could not see her face, but he could sense the pain behind her calm tone, the loneliness of someone who had not been truly seen for years. At last, he said quietly, I will do it. In the days that followed, Kale prepared his tools. He worked in the Queen's private chamber, a silent room filled with the scent of lavender and fading candles. The Queen never removed her veil, but the soft curve of her hands, the stillness of her posture, the distant tone of her voice, they were all strangely beautiful. He painted carefully, studying the way light touched her form, how sadness seemed to rest upon her shoulders like a crown. Sometimes, she would speak to him while he painted. You are young, she said one afternoon. You have not yet learned how heavy time can be. Kyle smiled faintly. Maybe that is why I see hope where others see sorrow. She tilted her head slightly. And what do you see when you look at me? He paused. His brush hovered above the canvas. The words left his mouth before he could stop them. I see someone who looks better than girls my age, he said softly, because your beauty has lived through pain. It has become real. For a long time, the Queen said nothing. The silence filled the air like music too fragile to be played. Then she whispered, You speak boldly, scholar. I only speak truth. Your Majesty, Kale said quietly. Her veil shifted slightly, as though she might have smiled beneath it. Days turned into weeks. The portrait began to take life, though Kale did not understand why the colors seemed to change when he looked away. He began to dream of her, not the veiled queen, but a woman standing in sunlight, free from sorrow, her hair shining like dawn. One night he awoke to find the painting glowing faintly in the dark. The queen's shape on the canvas seemed to move. Her eyes glimmered like stars trapped in still water. He stepped closer, his heart racing. Her voice echoed softly in the silence. Kyle! He turned, but the queen was not in the room. Only the painting remained, whispering his name like a memory that refused to fade. The next morning, he went to her chambers. She sat near the window, the faint morning light touching the edge of her veil. You should not work at night, she said calmly, though her hands trembled slightly. There are old powers in this palace that wake when the moon rises. Kale hesitated. Your Majesty, I think the painting— Stop. Her tone sharpened for the first time. Do not speak of it. He fell silent, but his heart would not rest. Every stroke he painted seemed to call something deeper from her, a truth she had long hidden. On the 7th evening, when he finished the final lines, the Queen approached the canvas. She stood silently before it. Kale stepped back, uncertain. Then the candlelight flickered, and the painted eyes opened. The Queen gasped softly. The reflection on the canvas blinked, then smiled faintly. Not the same expression the Queen wore, but one filled with quiet sorrow. Kale felt a chill run through him. What is happening? He whispered. Ilara's veil trembled. You have awakened it, she said in a hushed tone. The curse sleeps no more. The painted figure's lips moved, though the Queen herself said nothing. From within the frame came a whisper, soft and distant. Thank you, Kale. The Queen staggered backward. The candlelight dimmed until only darkness filled the room. Kyle caught her before she could fall. Her heartbeat was faint, yet steady. She looked up at him through the veil, and for a moment he saw her eyes, silver, endless, and full of tears. Do not fear me, she said weakly. But remember this, what you see in that painting is not me. It is what was taken from me long ago. Kyle looked toward the portrait. The painted version of her now seemed peaceful, almost alive, watching him with a strange tenderness. He whispered, Then what have I brought back? The Queen did not answer. She closed her eyes, her voice fading to a whisper. something the world was never meant to see again. That night, as Kale left the chamber, he felt the air grow colder. The palace corridors seemed to whisper his name, echoing softly with each step. When he looked back, the door to the queen's room was slightly open. Through the narrow crack, he saw a faint light, the glow of the portrait breathing softly in the dark. A chill passed through him. Something told him this was only the beginning. End of part 1.